Welcome to the Untitled Car Project podcast, your one stop show about Indian car enthusiasts capable of giving Dominic Toretto a run for his money. With serial gearheads Siddhant and Shivam, here we go.
Yeah, hi sir.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'll let you out on a few things about the project that we started. What we figured out was that India eventually doesn't have a platform wherein people can, enthusiasts can go to and know about what is the scene, the car culture, and the whole scene of the people only in this South India know it, like the culture in Chennai. Those guys know it. Bangalore has a huge car culture. We actually wanted to know the whole scene wherein how did you come up with the whole idea of RaceConcepts. Now how did you get to a platform wherein currently you are tuning the Hondas in India? All the best Honda tunes are there, out there. Like currently the dragster, which is the Accord, which is running around 600 horsepower, wheel horsepower. So we just wanted to know your journey, wherein you tell us about the whole situation. How did you get from being a person who was not into tuning and eventually got into tuning and got into the whole culture wherein everyone praises you right now. That's the whole situation right now. So we actually wanted to know about that.
Yeah. So I started quite early as an enthusiast, right from my younger days, from my early childhood. I had a lot of flair for anything that moved, especially bikes, cars. As a child, I was an artist, so I used to sketch a lot of cars and bikes, mostly cars. So I had a lot of, detail in mind with how an automobile is supposed to be, and how the, there was a good, strong understanding right from then. And then as I, turned 18, my dad got me a bike back in 2001. And then it was one thing after the other leading. While I was in my school days also, I used to have the habit of fiddling around with stuff at home, and would do a lot of experiments. I remember when I was in class 7 or class 8 is when I first was fiddling with my dad's bike. And it was something that I was always very curious about, and I used to do a lot of very interesting concepts in at the school and college science exhibitions. Did a lot of I had a big flair for anything that worked, and anything that I always wanted to know how things worked and how they went about. And it was a lot of curiosity right from childhood. So I think that's what led me into growing that passion into something at a larger scale. So once I got thinking about how how I can make my bike faster, and how I can go about doing things, I think my journey started as early as 2002. When I started doing a lot of things on my own bike. So I always worked on a 4-stroke bike. And so I've been quite well versed from a very long time with how these engines work. And while the whole world debated that 4-strokes are no good and 2-strokes are the way to go, it was a big challenge to stand against the odds back then. Those days, early 2000s.
Yeah, I guess early 2000, I was 2 years old. So you started your journey long back.
Yeah, so it was just a very very new thing for it was a very different trend to for anyone to believe in with a 4-stroke. So that being said, the whole my interest towards making a 4-stroke engine more and more efficient and things like that was one big part of my journey. And I was part of a few forums, and I used to see what people are doing and what the general culture is, and I tried to adapt to those things. And my first step was to basically modify my bike, which was a Suzuki Fiero. And starting off with that, we went about doing a whole lot of things to that bike. And that journey lasted till about maybe 2007 or something. I was pursuing a lot with that bike for about 5 years. I did a lot of things, made it a 200cc O-bore 4-stroke with larger valves and cam and this, that. And so this immediately caught a lot of people's attention because people saw, this one guy doing a lot of mad things. And, then people's curiosity started building up and people started asking me, what am I really doing? And so like I said, I was part of a lot of forums. I used to meet a lot of people, go on rides. And then, parallelly, while I was experimenting with my bikes and doing all this, I also had a flair for riding fast. And so I had this whole thing of competitor angle. And then I used to compete at a lot of events. So started off doing track days as early as 2004, I think. And
So back then the track was still the MMRT.
no,
Or what did you?
I visited MMRT once, I think in 2002 or something, the very first time. But my first track day was at Curry Motor Speedway in
Oh, the
2004. It was Coimbatore.
yeah, yes,
So that
yeah,
was our first. It was basically an organized track day by Indian Motorsport Adventures back then. It was Anand Dharmaraj who organized the event, and it was a fun thing. I actually didn't go there with any expectation that I would get hooked to it. I just thought, it's just a place to go and ride your guts out, without traffic,
yeah.
without a cow crossing the road or without an auto rickshaw. So it was just a place to freak out. But then the minute I, went out, took the first corner, I felt the grip levels, and it just made me feel like a completely different person the minute I took the first corner. And then I tried to learn how to ride and how to go about the techniques because it was fairly
Hmm.
new. I mean, as a guy who rides on the street, you have a very stiff body. You don't really uh, understand a lot of things
Yeah, you don't look
about the
at the racing
dynamics.
lines. You just take the
Yeah, so
cut,
you don't
the first
understand
curve
the
that's on.
dynamics of actually, riding on a racetrack. So I think that one session that I had, the very first outing, it was a 2-day outing. I remember it was Saturday and Sunday. Those 2 days entirely changed my life. I think so. My focus from just being a guy who wanted to build a bike fast, it
Yeah,
changed into a different perspective where I wanted to then make the bike fast and also ride it harder. So it turned into that.
yeah,
So, it gave me a different dimension. And I think that's what made me push the limits because, I mean, if you're just building a bike, it's one thing. But then today, one of the key things that I'm proud to say I possess is that, I can build something and also drive it. So that actually puts things in perspective and, it immediately gives me the first feedback. And, that's the best because, you can maximize it and you know what's lacking and you know what's working. So that, makes it all the more influential to develop a product or anything for that matter, to a very high standard. So
yeah.
yeah,
I would
so
like to talk
then
about the current culture wherein everyone somehow wants to turbocharge their vehicle and get it on the track, get it fast. So what would you suggest to the listeners and the viewers that how to go about turbocharging a vehicle? Wherein what are the steps? Like most of the people, they don't compressor map the whole thing. They don't look at the engine. Like what are the pressure ratios that you're running? So what is your first this thing wherein what is the first approach to turbocharging a car?
see, well, to turbocharging a car, first is you should know what your purpose is. I mean, is it a street car? Is it a race car? Is it a hot street car? Is it a weekend car? So it all depends on what sort of power gains you're looking at. And based on the power levels, you need to really build your engine up. So mechanical integrity of an engine is everything. I mean, you can have the best turbo in the world. You can have all sorts of fancy parts, but if you've not built your engine right, it's all over. So it's one thing to turbocharge engines like your, a Volkswagen TSI or the Skoda TSI, which is factory turbo. You just hop up a bigger turbo on it, and then
Yeah.
you put a map, you run a downpipe, you run an intercooler, this, that. I mean, that's the larger, that's what is happening at a very large scale today. It's all
Yes, that's
bolt-on
very true.
upgrades. But then that isn't the hardcore way of building a car. Um, so if you want to build it the way you build a hardcore engine by starting up from the internals and then making them capable and strong enough and then making it efficient to flow and then to boost and gain power. So the first and most important thing is to basically build your engine right. make sure you have the right components. And then once you got that right, you need to understand what power levels you need to have. So like you said, the compressor map is very important. You definitely need to know
Definitely, sir.
what you're aiming at, because you don't want an engine which is too laggy. You don't want an engine which is too early.
Yeah.
So it needs to be the right, so it needs to hit the sweet spot. So turbo sizing and knowing how to integrate your flow efficiency from the engine with the turbo's flow rate. It's a very important it's a most important and most critical aspect. So it's then comes your the way you go about setting up the whole thing, making the whole package, integrating the whole package, and then also refining it, tuning it, and then making sure you have no niggles. So this is the whole the basic outlay. However, there is a lot of experience required and involved in doing all this, right? It's not that you can just slap on a turbo and make power and go fast.
Very
It
much.
doesn't work
Very
like
much
that.
true.
So definitely a lot of experience is required.
Someone doesn't have a budget for turbocharging their car, but they want to increase the performance, and let's say it's a petrol engine. What are the possible modifications for a petrol engine?
See, for the naturally aspirated petrol engine, I mean, if you don't have a turbocharger, then the next other available petrol option is the naturally aspirated engine. So there, the most easy and the most efficient thing to do is replacing your exhaust system with something well developed. Not every exhaust which has few pipes coming out of the cylinder head is good. It needs to be tuned. It needs to be of the right dimension. It needs to be flowing right to make the right gains. So a well-tuned exhaust system and a well-calculated and a cold air intake system with the right dimension, etc. It's just not again a filter and a pipe. Everybody thinks it's just a cold air. It's not like if you stick your filter out of your bonnet, you will get cold air and engine make power. It's how the air enters the engine in an efficient manner in a certain there are some harmonics involved. So you need to really understand those things and do. So easiest thing, like I said, intake exhaust, and then you move on to other things like a lighter flywheel, and then you put a better clutch if you want to put the power down better. And next most important thing is to get
second stage. Like getting into let's consider this being the first stage of the whole, getting into the tuning section. So getting into the second stage, would you consider, getting the ports, the headers, getting the head ported and polished?
Yeah, I mean, yes, cylinder head is definitely a very important aspect. I was just coming to that. So yes, improving the flow efficiency of a head is very, very important. I'm not sure to what extent people understand that, but everybody thinks porting and polishing. It's a name that is tagged P&P, but
people regularly don't know what velocity stacking is and how to do about it.
People don't really know what porting and porting is. It's basically porting is a term that widely is used with two strokes because you hog the hell out of the inlet, the transfer ports and the intake exhaust ports. So it is not the same way it is with four strokes. So when it comes to four strokes, you basically say a cylinder head upgrade, or basically the whole process is to improve the efficiency of the head to make it flow in better, you flow out better, and then burn better. So this whole thing is definitely quite scientific. You need to have strong understanding, and I think that's where a whole bunch of magic in a four-stroke engine lies. Like I said, you can believe as much as you want in your turbocharger and other things, but everything works here.
That's very true. That's very true. Like even I myself is from automobile background, wherein I'm a fourth-year student right now doing automobile engineering from Chennai itself. So I've seen people talk about turbocharging their vehicles, but the key aspect I feel that they leave down is lowering the compression. Sometimes what they do is, run on high compression pistons and they just blow up their head gaskets and all. So how important is lowering the compression of the engine while you're turbocharging a naturally aspirated, which is initially not turbocharged, not factory turbocharged?
Now a lot of new generation engines, whichever is more and more emission compliant, you see from the way engines have been evolving for the last 20 years, the compression ratios of most naturally aspirated engines have been going up, mainly because they're trying to achieve a quicker burn rate, and they're trying to make the fuel burn every droplet to burn and leave out less residue, and there's a very tight packaging these days. If you see, the bore and stroke is quite different compared to what engines used to be. Most engines you see these days are long stroke engine, so they have a very
Yeah.
tiny architecture, a narrow block, taller block. This
True, true,
helps
true.
them in packaging the engine. So it helps them package the same engine in a variety of chassis. So these engines are basically they don't leave a whole lot of headroom like how manufacturers used to do 20 years ago,
20
where
years
they
ago,
would
yeah.
let you play around with a whole lot of things. So today most cars run 10:1, 10.5. There are even some cars which run about 11:1 compression,
Yeah.
and because of which your static compression being so high, obviously if you attempt to turbocharge such an engine, it is going to be disastrous, because you're what you do with the increasing temperature compression ratio is that you spiking up the cylinder pressure. So
It will eventually knock
increasing
at
the
some
cylinder
point.
pressure, yeah, increasing the cylinder pressure is what gives you a higher burn rate, and that is what translates to better response and better power. Now, turbocharging is also another similar principle where you're actually again stuffing the cylinder with more air, more fuel, and increasing the overall pressure, and then you're creating a higher power level. So a combination of an already increased air, cylinder pressure with higher compression, and on top of that boosting, it is
Boosting
definitely disaster. So
disastrous.
for sure
Yeah.
you need to definitely you need to lower it. So knowing what an engine is in static compression trim,
Yeah.
you need to lower it accordingly, and so that's when that's where a lot of understanding is required for you to know what sort of package to build. I mean, everybody has this concept of doing a very a low PSI setup. A lot of
Yeah.
people ask us also, even, like, why can't I just run a 5-6 PSI setup on a stock engine? Isn't it safe, etc.? I mean, you can think that it's safe, but then the engine would not be happy, because it definitely is going to be a bit of a deterrent. And while you might get some gains, definitely, like for example, any 1.5 liter car is around 100 horsepower. And if
Yeah.
you turbocharge it, you will definitely get it to about 140, 150 horsepower quite decently. But then how much of that horsepower you can use, and how much of that horsepower you can actually put out back to back, gear by gear, and not have any trouble, is something that I would not suggest, because definitely you're going to run into trouble, because you can't
Yeah.
increase the revs. You can't enjoy the power levels of the engine. So having a bump in power, 40%, 30%, 50% is one thing, but then how the power is generated, how you find that engine enjoyable is another thing. There's no point having an engine making a bit of more power, but then having the same rev cut as stock, or maybe
Yeah.
a few RPM lesser because you're trying to conserve the engine and things like that. So we would definitely wouldn't recommend doing it. In my opinion, the only way to build an engine right is by building it right.
You started modifying your bike in the initial stages, and like, do you had any pop culture influence that got you more into this field and modifying cars?
I would say the biggest influence that we had back then was, see, we didn't have a whole lot of internet like how it is today. It
Yeah.
was much lesser. There were a few forums and there was very little content and things like that. So it was more of how much people met and spoke and hung around. Today you don't see a lot of people hanging around, because everybody has a very different fast lifestyle. People are all like how we are talking today.
Right now.
So
I was about to get to that.
so it's life has come to this. So there's absolutely no more face-to-face approach. So back then there was a lot of time to catch up with people, and there was a whole lot of mingling around and things like that. So I think compared to what the community of the forums or anything is today, back then it was a lot more involving. People, we didn't have WhatsApp, we didn't have a whole lot of things. We just had a phone. That's it. So there was a good chance to actually bond with people. Like, I think the biggest influence for me at that point was, the people from the forums that I met, and the going for race weekends, meeting people there, and then we had a lot of guys hanging around on Saturday weekends, Saturday in the evenings with cars, bikes. So I think that whole thing of looking forward for the next weekend with the faster car, with a faster bike,
Yeah.
that kept pushing us. and then we used to go out a lot on Sunday mornings for drives and rides, etc. So it was always, that you wanted to look forward for something. And for me, because I also had the racing influence on one side, I think this whole thing of going back again to the racetrack to set a faster lap time and then to build something faster, going half a second faster, going 0.1 second faster, this became a big drive for me. So I think that is one of, again, the second big factors that influenced me to keep pushing myself. So there was no pop culture or anything as such. I think it was the circles that we were in, and the kind of people that we met. And I think it was the good times back then.
I just wanted to ask that how do you define a build which is specific to a particular type of racing, consider I want to get into autocross, rally, autocross. So what are the differences between the builds? A cord that you have currently built for a drag will be completely different than the cord that you want to build for an autocross situation. So how would you suggest the listeners and the viewers that how to go about the initial stages of tuning your vehicle to get it on a particular track that you want?
See, like there are different formats of racing. I mean, any form of motorsport, rather.
Definitely.
So there's one. So one is your tarmac racing, circuit racing, and then you have drag racing, and then you have mainly the dirt formats. I mean, so in dirt you have autocross, and then you have rallies. And off-roading is a different thing. I'm not going to get into that because that's not about going fast. So when it comes to rallying and autocross, so anything where you're going to deal with gravel versus tarmac, definitely gravel is a completely traction deterrent situation. So you don't have traction there, so you definitely can't have a ton of horsepower. Tarmac, on the other hand, is capable of putting down all the power that you make, provided you have the right tires and you have good grip levels. So these two things are two opposite type kind of sport. The gravel type and the tarmac type. So when you build a gravel type car, the emphasis is not on a lot of horsepower, although you can make a lot of horsepower. Now imagine you can actually put 700 horsepower of the Accord on a drag strip. There's no way in hell you're going to put that on gravel, because probably you're not even going to move 5 feet in first gear, because it is going to stand there spinning. So which is why you see even from WRC to everything, the power levels are capped. WRC's power levels are capped to 400 horsepower.
Everything has its own rule book.
Yeah, it's not just rule book. It's humanly difficult to drive something faster than that, because grip levels are constantly a concern. The rally cars are limited to 200 kph because it's very dangerous to go past 200. So although there were days, in the 80s when the Group B cars were brutal, they were faster than the Formula One cars of those days, and they were putting out mad numbers. And many people died, and it was finally people realized that it's just ridiculous to have that kind of horsepower. So it's a completely different approach. On a gravel surface, it's all about the skills of the driver and how you can place the car and how you can get it around a corner with least amount of wheel spin and least amount of drama. All this flamboyant styles and sliding it around and all that doesn't really make you go fast. It's nice to look at, and definitely a nice wallpaper, but not a nice way to go fast.
Like even Formula One, technically they say is actually, Formula One for Ferrari is actually come up from the Group B Lancia. They eventually built up the engine. So it's actually the whole consideration wherein Group B stopped after a while. Say after, I guess, 10 years, Group B was stopped because it was causing a huge amount of trouble and there was no cap on it.
Group B, I think, ran only for about 4 years, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, we are within a period of that.
Because,
So Formula One engines, the initial stage, the Ferrari started off with the Lancia engine. Yeah, that was a huge part of it.
Yeah, so like I said, building your car up for a certain kind of motorsport is definitely, there are two different opposites. Like an autocross car wouldn't need a lot of power. Like a rally car would need a lot more power, because the car is going to utilize a lot more straights and a lot more places where it can accelerate that much harder, etc. And then you have mix of loose and hard surface in gravel in a rally, whereas in autocross, because you're in a small limited space and you're just driving around tight corners, you're anyways not going to exceed a whole lot of speed. So it's all about having a car which is very agile, and you as a driver need to be very quick and responsive. So I think in an autocross, it's more of the driver and yeah, some bit of the car as well. But I would say mostly 60-70% of it is the driver and 30% is the car, 30-40%. And a rally, definitely the equipment is much more uh, need to be sorted because it needs better suspension. Every bit of the dynamics of the car will be crucial because you're doing higher speeds, and a whole bunch of things change. So there in rallying again, the car definitely equals the driver effort.
Yeah,
When it
definitely.
comes to racing and drag racing, it's all about how you can put your power down and how you can utilize the power from the engine. So in drag racing, it's all about how you can put every bit of the power to the ground. In racing, it's all about how you can put every bit of the corner, every bit of the power in every part of the racetrack, like on the straights, into the corner, entry of the corner, mid corner, exit of the corner, everywhere. So it's all
Yeah,
about having maximum tire contact. So and then the driver also has to do his job. Definitely, a
yeah,
lot of
that's
effort
definitely
is
there.
required in circuit racing. I would say of all these four types, drag racing is the simplest because there's not a whole lot required. All you have to do is just launch the car and then shift few gears, and job's done in few seconds.
Few
Yeah.
seconds, correct, correct.
So speaking of motorsport in India, like what is the current state of racing culture in India?
I think we are at a good place right now. Definitely, the racing bit is taken off quite well. We have a lot of interesting categories. We have, the circuit racing format going very well with the premium categories such as the ITC, and then the other subsequent categories in touring cars. And then you have the one make series, which are bringing in a lot of interest. Then you have the Formula cars, the Formula 2 liter and the 1.6, the 1600. Then you have the junior formulas. So definitely there are quite a lot of categories, and there are there are there are plenty of participants who come and do these races every year. And I think rallying is also picked up very well. I mean, a few years ago it was a bit dull. Today we are seeing very good entries. The
The
promoters are
Chikmagalur rally and all.
sorry, yeah. I mean, generally the numbers have picked up quite well from what it
Yeah,
used to be a few years ago. So the organizers are doing a great job. The federation is stepping up, and there are a lot of competitors, good drivers, good standards, faster cars. So definitely rallying is doing well. Autocross events also they're doing quite well. A lot of events I get to see. But I think drag racing is a bit of a dull point right now. It used to be quite active. If I'm not wrong, 2-3 years ago, we used to have quite a few events every year. Every year,
the
uh,
Bangalore at the Bangalore strip. That's the
yeah,
most
the
famous
Abbey
area for
Rally.
rally. Yeah,
Yeah, they used to be minimum three events a year. Now it's come down to barely one a year. So I'm not sure what the reason is. Maybe it's finding a place or whatever it is. I guess all these other forms, that is rallying, racing, and autocross, they're quite straightforward. Racing, there are three racetracks already.
yeah,
Rallying, there are places where the organizers have already identified and they run well. Autocross, there are a lot of private properties where people make their own tracks and they run. I think drag racing is a bit of a concern because most events happen at airstrips, and I think it's how the availability is and the costing is, and I'm sure it's pretty expensive to run an event. So I think
yeah. That's
because there is no dedicated drag racing facility in India, is definitely it's a bit of a letdown. I really wish we something came up because that could definitely help. You see drag racing draws in the highest numbers, everywhere abroad. And we've seen this, and we've seen this in India as well. We see the highest turnout of entries and cars and, audience and all sorts of things. And, a lot of show happening at a drag event compared to a rally or a race event. So definitely, I think if more racetracks come up, then for sure there'll be a lot more.
yeah. That's definitely that's one of the huge things in India that we also need an NHRA to organize the whole drag racing circuit for India.
And what are the easiest, the most difficult, and the most fun car you have built till now?
I think the most difficult, I would say, has been our racing car, the Indian touring car, the ITC. It requires a lot of uh, mad skills to put the package together to make every bit of the car work, because it's not one angle that you're focusing on. It's not just the engine, it's not just the chassis, it's just not the handling, it's not just the braking. It's a combination of everything that has to work at its maximum limit. So getting the car to do a certain lap time, and then today we've got the quickest time around the racetracks. So it's been a job to really put the pieces together, and then also to work very closely with a very experienced driver. So it's very important that you understand the driver side of things, where you understand what the driver requires, and then you build the car accordingly. So it's a very intense activity.
Yeah.
The easiest, I think, would be in my I would say, I mean, I build a lot of street cars. We do a lot of everyday projects here. They're all, I mean, they're easy and they're complex and they're okay in their own ways. I think I find drag racing to be quite, in comparison, a lot easier,
Okay.
because your goal is just one thing. Just make a ton of horsepower, just put it down and just drive. So I would say it's, in comparison, it's not. I'm not saying it's easy, but in comparison to what the difficult angle is, I think this is easy. So I think the dragster, the Honda 1.5 VTEC dragster that we built out of a 1.5 liter to make 600 plus horsepower, that was a task. So I think that was great fun. And in comparison, I would say it is much easier. The only focus was to build up the engine to hold well. And the most fun I think I've had is recently I built a Zen two-door.
Yeah, we saw this. Yes. That's a
I think,
beautiful
yeah,
vehicle.
so I think that's been the most fun car in a long time. Yeah, so I think it was a great thing, just a lockdown project, just to have some fun, and it turned out better than expected. So
How would you suggest someone, if someone wants to get into the motorsport culture and not into the racing culture, the motorsport culture wherein he or she wants to be a part of a team that builds the vehicle? How would you suggest, how to get into the whole circuit of that thing?
okay, so basically, to get more opportunities for people who want to be in the sport, like you said, not driving it, but then being at the back of the scene. There needs to be more opportunities for racing itself. There needs to be more of the sport.
There has to be.
There needs to be more cars. There needs to be more larger grid, and everything needs to happen at a larger scale. So for that, a lot of things have to happen. So it's an indirect thing. As much as I can advise a career path for people, this is something that has to happen from grassroots level, from the federation to a lot of things upwards. But answering your other point, where you asked about how somebody can get something, to be in motorsport, I would say it is to identify your interest first, because a lot of people come to us and they say, they want to be in racing, they want to join us, and they want to be an intern and all that. But then nobody understands the difficulty in it. Everybody thinks it's a cakewalk. They think, it's flamboyant,
Definitely.
that you're part of a racing team, and it's not much of a hassle and things like that. But then you need a hell of a lot of dedication, and I don't know.
And the working hours are always too
people,
crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if people are going to be that dedicated these days, because I've seen a ton of kids, who have promised a lot of things, but then they just don't deliver because they don't understand. They give up so easily because they think that it's like Formula One or MotoGP, where everything is so this thing. And we are in a country where things are at a far lower level than what it is abroad. So for sure there is a lot that we need to catch up on, and the standards have to improve. The racing has to be a lot more, and for the economics of this to go up, so that everybody benefits. So people who are employed, people who are running the teams, people who are part of this, the whole scenario has to pick itself well. So you can't extract anything out when there's nothing coming in. So I think the thing is in basically identifying first to have the interest in you, and then try and hang around race weekends, come and see what's going on. First understand what this is happening at our level in India, not looking at a Formula One pit and then thinking that, that is how things are.
No,
It
that's
isn't the
exactly
case.
not how it works. Yeah. I
Yeah.
completely
So
understand.
so doing that, and then maybe hooking yourself up with a racing with a team, or going and trying to offer help, and then slowly take it from there. Definitely, there is nobody going to hold your hands and take you through a journey, because if
True,
you're going to
true.
be a part of a very serious team, they're going to be head over heels working flat out. So they might not be enough time for them to direct you or show you the thing. And so I think it has to all come from within.
Is it safe? Is it safe to say that everyone can eventually approach a team and talk to them and show their interest and show that they're willing to work and dedicatedly work? Like, even you must be knowing in the college level right now, there are students working on Formula student teams, and their Baha teams. So,
Mhm.
is there a huge intake of students from there as well?
Uh, Sadly not. I'll be honest, because there are very few teams and there are very few people that are in behind the scenes, because
Yeah,
everything
true.
is happening at a certain cost. And now I'll just quickly tell you, the whole the problem that we have with the Indian system, the recruitment system, is that now a student is graduating in a certain college, and is trying to get into motorsport, get into something where they want to have some fun. The first thing is that the typical stereotype society, where they want to see their children do a certain kind of a job
Yeah,
and then earn a certain amount of salary. So this whole stereotype, I think, ruins the whole picture, because if you want to be in motorsport, it's a hardcore route. It's not.
yeah,
It's not like going to a corporate, finding a job, getting a few lakhs CTC per year, and then sorting your life, and then going
yeah.
and settling
That's very
abroad,
true.
things like that. So this is what every guy looks forward. So they want to come make a career and then immediately jump into something, and then tag themselves into a bandwagon, and then just and then say that they got their life sorted. It's not going to be a cakewalk, because being in motorsport, surviving the odds, going through the whole all the turbulence that is around, and then successfully passing through it is definitely a task. The pressure that's involved in motorsport is definitely a
Yeah,
lot. The pressure of being in a team, the pressure of doing your everyday tasks, and then looking at the way the Indian system works. Everybody, first thing they would ask is, how much money are you making in this? You definitely can't make a whole lot of money, and there are not too many factory teams where you can get a job there and then get a whole lot of money. And then so it's a slow process, definitely something that you need to be willing to take up with some amount of risk. There are some people who got employed in Volkswagen and few teams, places like that, but there's not a whole lot of opportunity everywhere, because the maximum size of the sport itself is very little. If you
very
look at
little.
it
Yeah,
from the larger perspective, the automobile business, the sector is quite large, but tuning and motorsport is nothing. I would say it's not even 1%. It's nothing. It's too small a thing to even call itself an industry, or anything for that matter, because it's just a handful of people, and it's just a very few bunch of people who are enthusiastic and who want to drive and then who want to build cars, etc. I mean, just to give you a perspective, today, if a certain car is being sold, in thousands every month, and that
yeah,
mounts to a few lakhs every year, you think a percentage of those cars are actually getting tuned? No, this is now one
no,
brand. Now, if you look at it, across the cars, that all sorts of cars, all sorts of MPVs and SUVs, everything across the board. You see a few crore cars on the road every year, but you don't even see 1% of those cars getting tuned or anything happening to it.
that's
But
it.
you see the accessory business and everything else is doing well, because those things are like mostly need of the hour. They are things that people require for their comfort of or for their luxury or whatever. But then motorsport and tuning is considered like the last option, the least priority. So definitely it is something that is currently at a very low scale.
It has been a amazing experience, and we wish to have you again on this little project of ours. I hope this
Sure,
reaches
my
out to
pleasure.
the most of the enthusiasts of the world, of India at least for now. And we
All
would
right.
like to plug in your socials as well, and you can just let us know your social media handles and to the viewers as well.
Yeah, sure. You can find us on Facebook. It's just RaceConcepts. company website is www.raceconcepts.in, and Instagram handle is RaceConcepts. So you can catch us. You can see what we do. There are a lot of interesting posts that we put out. You can follow us, see what we are up to. We have a lot of interesting things that we keep putting out almost every day. So you guys should definitely not miss it. It's always a pleasure interacting with people, and I love talking about things, cars and tuning. I can go on for hours together.
That was the whole point of having this conversation with you, when people who actually want to get into the whole car scene and they don't have a platform to know about the information. And so that's what we are trying to do with our little Untitled Car Project. Thank you so much for.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Nice catching up with you.
Thank you.
Bye.